Pumps are not for everyone. I don't think anyone should feel pressured or forced to go on a pump. I think the biggest thing about a pump is convenience, because you can do amazing on MDI. I know a ton of people doing great on multiple daily injections. They have their basal insulin, they have their bolus insulin. I know I've done episodes about the importance of, or the advantages of being on MDI versus the pump. What I will say here is the going bad in the sun aspect of things. Is it possible while you're on a pump for it to go bad in the sun? Yes. Is it super likely? Probably not, unless you are at the beach, your pump is in direct sunlight, and you are there for a couple hours. Has that happened to me ever? It happened to me one time. I learned my lesson.
Welcome to the Your Diabetes Insider podcast, where we take all of the mysteries of blood sugar control, focusing on nutrition, exercise, and any of the other 40 plus factors that may impact your blood sugar. If you don't know me, my name is Ben Zeal. I'm a registered dietitian, certified diabetes educator, strength and conditioning coach, and I've lived myself with type 1 diabetes for over 20 years. And I am here to share everything that I have learned in both my personal and professional experience so you can live that incredible diabetes life. So get ready and let's dive right into today's episode.
What is going on? Welcome to this episode of the Your Diabetes Insider podcast. And today I want to take a bunch of questions that I've received from social media, through email, from other sources, and answer them for you so you feel like you have good answers for a wide variety of things related to diabetes, type 1, type 2, blood sugars, low blood sugars, all of the things in general. I'm definitely still recovering from jet lag from having traveled last week, and it was a little rough, so forgive me, but I want to make sure I answer these for you as best as I can to make sure that you've got some good context for it, because people submit questions and I want to make sure that I'm able to address them in the breadth that is deserved. So sometimes you get a comment on social and I can't write a massive essay, but I can talk a massive essay. So without further ado, here's some of the best ones that I've gotten. So what is the best combination to take for low blood sugars? Someone else asked, what's a good thing to grab when your blood sugar is low? And then a third person asked, have you ever had a low blood sugar that caused your lips and tongue to go numb? So in a nutshell, the theme here is low blood sugar. Have I personally ever had a really severe one? And then what's the best thing to grab to ensure your blood sugar goes up? So when it comes to low blood sugars themselves, typically people will say, oh, grab 15 grams of carbs, wait 15 minutes. It's easy to remember. It's not necessarily the best thing in practice. And I say that because some low blood sugars don't need 15 grams. A lot of them you can get away with 8. You can get away with 12, depending where your blood sugar is, the size of the human being. For example, a child might only need 8 or 9 grams. Additionally, if your blood sugar is 65, you as an adult may only need 8 or 9 grams, right? So the biggest thing is context. However, in terms of combination, what I always suggest to people is after that first low blood sugar, if you have another one, you want to prevent the rebound low blood sugar, or if you're being very active, you're hiking, you're out and about, you're doing something, carbs plus some protein or fat, or a little bit of both, because that protein and fat will help to stabilize your blood sugar just a little bit more. So ideally, instead of just going up and then drifting back down, you go up, you might drift, but you stay in range. And that's the more important part here, because the last thing you want is you treat a low, you go low again. You treat a low, you go low again. And if that's happening, if you have to factor in, is it from activity? Is it from a medication that's too strong? Is your basal insulin too high? You have to start asking these questions with your care team, but having that protein or fat ideally helps prevent that rebound. Now, in terms of, have I ever personally had a low where my lips and my tongue went numb? Lips, no. Tongue has happened one time. It was not a pleasant experience at all. It was really actually interesting. So I was talking with my friend, Chris Rudin, who you might know from the diabetes space. He's been in it for quite some time now, I think almost a decade. And we were having a conversation. This was probably about a year and a half ago or so. And we're talking, everything was chill, normal chat, talking about diabetes stuff, what's going on in the community. We like to lift. So talking about lifting. And all of a sudden, out of nowhere, the conversation from my end, it just started to devolve. Like I was having a harder time forming sentences. I was having a really hard time with just thinking. And he started to pick up on it. He's like, you might want to see where your number's at. And so I tested and I was around 40. And at that point too, I hadn't realized it, but my tongue was feeling a little bit numb. And it was, not a great experience. I don't recommend it, 0 out of 10, but I treated it. Thankfully, it came back into range. He was obviously chill, of all people, he's got diabetes too. He gets it. But that was a very not great experience. It's one of those things where it was a low enough blood sugar where it can be really scary. And in my case, in that situation, it had come out of nowhere. I had trained lower body, so it made me more susceptible to low blood sugars because I had a massive workout. and it was between meals. So I was, 4 hours after I'd eaten breakfast, everything was chill. We started talking. I was like 1:30 and it just kept dropping for whatever reason. So it has happened. Not great, but it has. This person says, I love the freedom of Lantus. I bring a medicine cooler with me and it stays cold all day. Everyone tries to get me back on a pump. My skin's sensitive. It brews and rejects the insulin or goes bad in the sun in a pump. Can it do this? I mean, so here's the thing. Pumps are not for everyone. I don't think anyone should feel pressured or forced to go on a pump. I think the biggest thing about a pump is convenience because you can do amazing on MDI. I know a ton of people doing great on multiple daily injections. They have their basal insulin, they have their bolus insulin. I know I've done episodes about the importance of, or the advantages of being on MDI versus the pump. What I will say here is the going bad in the sun aspect of things. Is it possible while you're on a pump for it to go bad in the sun? Yes. Is it super likely? Probably not, unless you are at the beach, your pump is in direct sunlight, and you are there for a couple hours. Has that happened to me ever? It happened to me one time. I learned my lesson. This was like 10 years ago. I had just gotten onto a tandem at the time, and I went out to, it was ironically the pool. I was back in grad school. I was with one of my friends, and I went and looked at my pump, and I hadn't even thought about my pumps, there. I don't want to be laying on it, but we're hanging out, and suddenly I look at the pump, and it says, pump stopped, overheated. So that was a little spooky. I'd never had that happen to me before. This was, again, like I said, this is 10, maybe even 11 years ago at this point. And with that, I knew, okay, if the pump's overheated, it's probably well past the temperature that the insulin is going to be still efficacious, right? Because insulin, once you hit over 86 degrees, is going to start to denature. It's a protein, so it's not going to work as well. And so at that point, when I went back in, I was able to get out of the sun. It cooled off enough to be able to use the pump. But then at that point, I had to change the insulin because I didn't want any situation that could have led to a super high. So in that situation, yes, it could happen. But again, the odds of you being in direct sun with the pump directly in the sun is probably not super high, especially as we're getting into the colder time of year. On the flip side, like I've been to the beach many times since then, and there's been no issue because I didn't have it directly into the sun. In terms of rejecting the insulin and skin being sensitive, I mean, it could be a scar tissue thing or the adhesive thing, but I don't know if it's necessarily rejecting insulin. My child's in high school taking college classes as well. How did testing look in college? Did you have to have a receiver for your CGM? No phones, exception policy and testing centers in college, we were preliminarily told. So, okay, in a case like this, and I know I for sure, I'm 98% sure I did an episode about accommodations in college and going after that, and in high school too, for that matter. But if not, definitely let me know. The biggest thing here is if you have a receiver for the Dexcom, you may want to have it because that way it's a lot less likely that there's any sort of issue. I have heard of some situations where universities will say, hey, show the phone before the exam and just show that it's off in airplane mode. And then at that point, you have your blood sugar and it's right there. Some might say, hey, have the blood sugar as have the CGM on the desk with the screen permanently on. So if someone were to walk in, they can see only the CGM and it's obvious that they're not doing anything, cheating or anything like that. I think it's something where you could probably come up with a good game plan with them because you want to make sure you have the ability to see what your blood sugar is. Now, again, if you're somebody who's using an insulin pump and you control it from your phone, you're going to have your phone with you. Like there's not really it's okay. Like I can go, like you're going to need to know because what if you start to feel low and you're not sure? The other thing they could argue is, okay, we'll take your glucose, testing kit into the room. And if you start to feel funky, you can test that way, which is viable. But if you need to shut your insulin down, your phone needs to be somewhat around you for it to either A, have the algorithm be able to do that for you, or B, for you to see, the trend is starting to drop. I need to make sure I'm okay. Or the trend is starting to go up. I need to be able to dose because what's also not fair is for you to have to go get up from your test, break your concentration, et cetera, and say, hey, I need my phone so I can dose my insulin. And there may or may not be, depending who's there, any sort of back and forth conversation that might be unpleasant. So I think there's a way to solve it. It may be as simple as, hey, similar to an airplane, right? Go in airplane mode, your phone is still there. You can still control everything for the pump and the CGM, but that would be my 2 cents. If you're on MDI, obviously slightly different conversation. You have your pens, or your syringe or whatever on the desk. You have the CGM there. You could use a receiver for the CGM purposes, but if you need to dose from your phone, that's where it could become a problem. Let's see. Out of curiosity, are there any long-term juvenile onset, which is an outdated term, type 1 diabetics with no complications from the long term of living with diabetes. What type of access do they have to achieve that status? Where are I don't know where they are. There's been tons of people. I've talked to people on social media all the time where they're like, hey, I've had diabetes for 45 years. I've had it for 55 years. I've had it for, I think the record I ever heard was someone with over 60 years of living with type 1 with no complications. And I don't think it's necessarily an access thing. I think genuinely it is a putting stuff into practice thing. I think it's a partial motivation thing. How bad do you want it per se? And I don't say that to, sound like a high and mighty individual. I say that to be honest, right? You want to know, okay, I'm motivated to do this or I'm not motivated to do this. And then I think the other thing is, as technology has gotten better, I do think it is technically easier, but there's still that human component. You have to ask yourself, again, are you willing to put in that extra little bit of work to maximize the tools you have at your disposal? Because it's very easy to put on a pump and say, oh, the pump's going to do 85% of it for me. And it will do a decent job, but it's not going to be perfect. And I've seen people on pumps with A1Cs in the double digits because they just don't try. They don't do anything. So you have a situation where you have access to a pump, amazing. If you, like I said before, if you're on MDI, you're on multiple daily injections, you can still do incredible on that and have an A1C in the fives and not have tons of lows and not have tons of highs and feel great. It's really a matter of, are you willing to do those steps necessary in order to do that? And there are multiple examples, I think dozens, hundreds, probably thousands of examples of people who have had diabetes for a long time without any adverse consequences. But again, there are people that are willing back in the day to say, hey, I'm going to pee on this to figure out roughly what my blood sugar is, pee on this, glucose strip thing, or I'm going to, based on, gouging my finger with this massive, lance to get the blood sugar reading that takes 2 minutes to read it. I'm going to be religious with that. And I'm going to pay attention to my food. I'm going to pay attention to my activity to make sure I feel my best. So I think some of it is asking a question like that. I don't think it's a bad question. I think it's a very legitimate, are there people that have done it? The answer is yes, but you have to ask yourself, if you want to become a member of that group, which of course I would like to, I would imagine you would like to, or your loved one would like to, if you're listening to this for them, you have to ask yourself, are you willing to put in the effort to do that, right? Because theoretically, you can argue in the same vein, right? Oh, are there people that, become professional athletes that don't have tons and tons of talent? Yeah, but because they wanted to do it bad enough. And they said, hey, I was able to outwork everyone and make this happen. It's the same thing with diabetes. If you're in a situation that's less than ideal, maybe you're on multiple daily injections, you can't get access to a pump, you have to test your blood sugar a bunch, you can still do it. It's just a matter of, are you willing to go through the steps necessary? So that would be my answer to that question. This person said, I've been diagnosed with type 2. 3 weeks in, I was taken off medication due to days with lots of lows. I'm worried and scared to work out to the best of my capabilities due to the scare with lows. Even without meds, my average is 120 via Dexcom. What should I do? I lift for an hour and a half to 2 hours and 30 to 45 minutes of cardio. Should I tone it down? So obviously this would be something where, the person would have a very specific plan of care. Like there's no other way around it. But as a very broad overview for someone like this, you're type 2, you're insulin sensitive, which is great. You've had some lows, which is not great. I wouldn't say completely tone it down. Like you're working out an hour and a half to 2 hours is a long time. Like for perspective, when I go into the gym, if I'm in the gym longer than 75 minutes from warm up to cool down and leaving and everything else, that's a really long workout for me. So I think the length of time may be contributing. I also, in that person's case, would want to know, what's the food look like? What is the food routine looking like? What other medications are in play? It could be a situation of, hey, there are no other medications that are specific to diabetes, but could there be something else that they're taking? Maybe they're taking, for example, as a supplement, berberine, right? Maybe there are other things that they're taking that might be insulin sensitizing that they're not even aware of that could be causing this. And I would also want to know, what's the game plan prior to the workout, right? Is there a snack going in? Is there some sort of carb, laden snack 30, 35 minutes before the workout to ensure there aren't going to be low blood sugars? I'm not advocating to raise your blood sugar to 190 and then let it drop, but I'm also not advocating for you to go into a workout at 110, knowing you're going to fall off a cliff 15 minutes into the workout. So I think in a situation like this, I wouldn't necessarily, tone it down. I might say, okay, you're used to going at 100%. Maybe for the next week or two, pull back to 80% and say, hey, I'm at 80%. I'm going to go through this. I'm still going to push myself. I'm not going to destroy myself, but I'm going to push myself. And I'm going to then say, okay, maybe I cut down the workout a tad. I've got a good game plan going in. Maybe I need a snack during, dare I say that? Not super likely, but there's a potential for that happening. And then also, what does my nutrition look like as a whole? Am I working with a registered dietitian? Again, I'd say this, like my team and I are all dietitians. We all have the BETUS ourselves. We all have exercise backgrounds. We'd be happy to help in a situation like this. But make sure with your team, whether it's us, whether it's somebody else, make sure that you are talking with your team about a specific game plan to be able to attack this. Because if your nutrition is off and you don't have a dietitian in the picture, it could very well just be a, hey, there's not enough fuel in the picture, or there's not enough fuel surrounding the workout, and that's why you're crashing every time. So that would be how I would go about it. Obviously, everybody's going to be a little bit different, but this is the importance of having a dietitian on the team, because people think, oh, I don't need a dietitian. Dietitians are, well, of course, we're going over blood sugars too. But the other thing people forget is food dictates 80% of your blood sugar, right? There's all these other factors. I'll talk about 40 plus things impacting your blood sugar. Of course, there's other major things, but food drives 80% of it. So because of that, if you don't have a dietitian in the picture, it would be very advantageous for your blood sugar's sake for you to make sure you find someone that's you can trust, that's on your care team, that can work on that part for you in conjunction with your blood sugars. So that is my rant. This last one's a fun one. This one's actually very interesting. How is your sexual health because you are married, but you have diabetes? And I think this is a very real one. I know I did an episode way back. It was one of the most popular ones that we've done. And it was specific to, sex and diabetes and things you need to know. And I probably should do another one, maybe bring in Amelia and talk about it. But from a diabetes standpoint, if your numbers are not controlled, it will impact your sexual health. Like I will say straight up for me, right? When it comes to doing the thing, we'll just leave it at that, right? When it comes to doing that, I know if I am over 200, I am not going to perform as well. And of course, if I'm low, good luck even getting a half mast, right? There's not a shot. There have been times where, again, sex is technically a physical activity where doing it, everything's great. And then suddenly I'm like, what's going on? And it's just like, and it just dies. And I look at my number and sure enough, I was, 125 going in and suddenly I'm 80 with a down arrow, which means I'm probably lower than that. And that's the end of that. So it's not a super common issue, knock on wood, thankfully for me. But what I will say is, yeah, if my number's out of range one way or another, it's very unlikely that it's going to happen. Or if it does, that it's going to be as satisfying. So from a, high blood sugar standpoint, sure. Can you do it at, 300? Sure. It's doable. It's just not fun. It doesn't feel as good. It just feels kind of like, ugh. And then from a low blood sugar standpoint, good luck. There's no shot. If you do, again, it's not going to feel very fulfilling and it's going to almost feel like, oh God, can this just be done? But from an overall standpoint, people talk about the, for dudes, your little guy down there is basically your fifth appendage. So if your blood sugars aren't controlled, you got all these little blood vessels. People talk about, neuropathy and, blood vessel impact and being able to have, feeling in your fingers, etc. That goes for down there. So if your blood sugars aren't well controlled, like ED is a very real thing amongst men with living with diabetes, especially when you've had it for a long time. So you have to pay attention to that. And it's just yet another reason to ensure that your blood sugars are under great control. So I can expand on that and do another episode. Like I said, I probably should bring Amelia on at some point. But I hope this gave you at least some food for thought, some interesting thought processes, some questions that you've been maybe curious about for a while. And if you ask one of these questions, I'm hopeful I was able to answer it pretty well. But holler at me. Let me know what questions you've got. Living with diabetes, hit me up on social media at Man of Zeal, MANOFTZEEL, on TikTok, on Instagram. Holler at me. Let me know what questions you want me to answer. If you are someone who wants a little bit extra support with your blood sugars so you can have amazing numbers while eating great food, doing the things you want to do, not stressing about any long-term issues, and just living a life unrestricted by your diabetes, my team and I are here to help. Definitely just hop on over to yourdiabetesinsider.com. If you're listening to this and you're loving the podcast, you're getting a lot from it. It'd mean the world to me if you're able to drop a 5-star review on Spotify, on Apple, wherever you're listening. With that, I will catch you in the next episode, and I hope you're having an awesome one.
Hope you're ready for the next episode. Hey.